Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Todd. I'm Sureserve's head of Net Zero Carbon, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar on developing strategic approaches for decarbonising social housing. This is the first in a series of decarbonisation focused webinars that we're going to be holding over the coming months. What we'll be discussing today is a little bit about Sureserve before setting the context and the scale of the retrofit challenge, moving on to how to develop a retrofit strategy, and then on to a bit about support and funding available for your retrofit projects. So as a brief introduction to Sureserve, we're a group of companies working across the compliance and energy services for social housing, public and commercial buildings. We're playing a progressive role in decarbonisation and facilitating the energy transition. As you can see from the map, we've got good coverage across Great Britain, and we've delivered schemes in all areas covering some of the major decarbonisation funding, including the SHDF, HUG and LAD, the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, Optimised Retrofit in Wales, and the Social Housing Net Zero Fund in Scotland, amongst many more. We install a wide range of energy measures, including heat pumps, solar PV and batteries, insulation, and energy efficient windows and doors. The numbers you're seeing on screen are 2024 up to June, with 2023 or previous years in brackets. And putting the spotlight on decarbonisation of heat, in 2023 alone, we installed over 3,500 heat pumps. That was approximately 10% of all of the microgeneration certification scheme registered heat pumps of that year, making us one of the largest heat pump installers in the UK. We're on a track to do many more in 2024. So moving on, we're going to set the context to the scale of the retrofit challenge. We know that the UK has some of Europe's oldest and leakiest houses. The map on the right shows research from Tado, who are a smart thermostat manufacturer, who looked at 80,000 homes across Europe, measuring their heat loss. On average, the UK had the highest level of heat loss from any European country tested. Our homes are predominantly heated by gas, 56% of which is imported, and that puts us at the mercy of global market forces that dictate energy supply and price. Emissions from our homes make a significant proportion of the UK's carbon footprint as well. We do have ambitious targets to reduce emissions, as you're seeing on screen. However, the Climate Change Committee has recently declared that we're way off from achieving net zero and that we don't have a credible plan to get there. The housing sector in particular has been hampered by stop-start cycles in funding and the absence of a single clear national plan to deliver retrofit. But the scale of opportunity is also huge. We're already seeing the green economy outpacing national growth quite significantly, and estimates the economic benefits of reaching net zero in the hundreds of billions. That's not to mention the hundreds of thousands of jobs as well that the retrofit sector will create. Turning the focus to social housing, we can see from the chart that social homes are on average more energy efficient than other tenures. The chart also indicates that certain housing archetypes are more energy efficient, so flats and terraced houses having a higher SAP rating than semi-detached and detached homes. So for social housing, it's not a terrible starting point, but we do acknowledge that EPC is not the perfect indicator for how warm, comfortable, and cheap to run a house is. And there's still a huge fuel poverty challenge in the social housing sector. Government estimates that 56% of homes below an EPC band C are in fuel poverty. There's also a significant investment required to bring social homes up to standard. Inside Housing did some research in 2020, asking hundreds of housing providers the cost to retrofit their homes. The average cost was around 20k per home, which with inflation applied is about 25.5k in today's money. And if you extrapolate that figure out across all of the social homes in the UK, you're looking at about 130 billion in order to retrofit to decent standards. So now that we've set the scene of the scale of the challenge and opportunity, we'd like to talk about the importance of developing a housing decarb strategy and provide some useful advice on how to approach it. The benefits of developing a long-term strategy include helping you to get internal buy-in for your retrofit projects and to get the resources secured in order to deliver them, helping you to communicate the programs to your external stakeholders, including both your residents and your supply chain and potential investors as well, helping you to better understand the costs of delivering your long-term program and identify where you have gaps in funding, which could help you to prepare for future funding rounds. An important starting point is to understand the retrofit project journey, which we've broadly split into 3 main phases. This journey can apply for a government grant-funded scheme like the SHDF, but also other non-funded schemes with some minor tweaks. During the preparation and design phase, this is where you're collecting and improving your data. You're undertaking retrofit scenario analysis to determine what works you'll be carrying out, what they might cost. You're identifying suitable properties, and you're completing your funding application with all of those details. You should also begin resident engagement early in this process and make sure that it's continuous throughout the retrofit project. During this initial phase, you should be doing your retrofit assessments and retrofit design and starting to engage with your supply chain to determine their capacity to deliver your works. You should be outlining your procurement routes, whether you'll be going down a framework or a dynamic purchasing system or other procurement route. And lastly, you'll need senior level buy-in if you're committing your own funds to your retrofit projects. So do make sure you're following your own internal governance procedures and leaving plenty of time to get sign-off. During the delivery phase, this is where you'll firm up your procurement routes and decide which elements you're going out to procurement for and what you might be doing in-house. For example, some housing providers may choose to do their retrofit assessments and coordination in-house if they've got people who are qualified to do those roles. Others, however, might want to procure a full turnkey solution that includes all your surveying work plus your installations. Resident engagement is critical during the delivery phase. This is probably the most disruptive phase for your residents, with increased noise on site, lots of people around, scaffolding, potentially relocating residents as well, depending on the types of measures being installed. For example, internal wall insulation or underfloor heating can be quite disruptive and will need people to be relocated for a short space of time during installation. When you come to the end of the works, make sure there's a really good handover to residents, but do understand that this isn't the end of resident engagement. The post-retrofit period is all about making sure the homes are performing well and that any issues are resolved in a timely manner, and ultimately that residents are realising the benefits of their upgraded homes. This can involve in-home monitoring of data such as temperature, humidity, and energy, and further resident engagement and advice about their new systems. After the defects period, the homes will pass on to business as usual into repairs and maintenance cycles. And housing providers may wish to introduce a regular home MOT to check that homes are operating as intended and continue to monitor any in-home monitoring. And lastly, funded projects do come with the administrative burden of reporting back to your funders. So make sure you've got resources in place to track and report on progress. Good data is really critical to developing your housing retrofit strategy. So you should have a really good understanding of your housing stock to be able to understand what you need to do to it to improve it and what it might cost. If you look at the flip side, having poor data can lead to a whole host of issues, including project and program delays and changes midway through the program. For example, needing to swap out homes which your starting EPC banding was actually higher than previously expected. All of these can lead to poor quality outcomes for your residents. Housing data is available from multiple sources, You should seek multiple sources in order to develop your programs. These can include your EPCs or full RDSAP data, retrofit assessments and other detailed surveys, and planned maintenance schedules. You should have a really good understanding of your home's attributes, including your wall types, levels of insulation, if there are any, floor areas, the age and condition of your stock, and then other key data points such as whether the buildings are in conservation areas or if they're listed buildings, which can restrict certain retrofit solutions due to planning issues. And finally, good resident data is also really critical. So take time to understand your customers, review any previous complaints, and know where you've got tenants with disabilities or other vulnerabilities, which could mean a really sensitive approach to retrofit and resident engagement are required. Strong data management is also important. Once you've got your data, you need to know how you're handling it in order to get the most out of it. So develop robust governance procedures that control who can edit and access your data, and put security and privacy procedures in place, particularly for resident data. You should review your data quality to make sure it's up to date, it's logical, it's accurate, and from a reliable source. And if it's determined that it's poor quality, then you may need to conduct further surveys to improve its reliability. Trust me, it's worth the investment in these additional surveys to get really good data quality from the outset of your retrofit programs. This can help to avoid any unforeseen costs and delays further down the line. Best practice data management is to make sure you have a single source of truth for your data so that all of your team are working from the same data sets, and also to secure it in a centralized and secure database. The last point in this slide is to make sure that you're considering housing stock modeling software. This can be a really good, efficient way to manage your data and prepare for your retrofit programs. There's plenty of things that you can do with this type of software, such as developing different retrofit scenarios, understanding the SAP improvement and the costs of them, and trying out different packages and measures. Most software tools also have data quality scores and give you useful advice on how to improve data quality over time. One point is to tread with caution with using these tools, though. They are reliant on good data inputs in order to get good data outputs. So the old adage of garbage in, garbage out really stands here. When you're coming to look for software, do some shopping around. There's plenty of solution providers out there, and they offer slightly different things depending on your housing stock size and portfolio type. Within your retrofit program, targets can also be really useful to help guide performance across your stock. Targets should be complementary and not competing, though. For example, reaching EPCC should be viewed as a stepping stone towards getting to net zero, acknowledging that EPCC alone doesn't solve fuel poverty nor reduce emissions sufficiently. When aiming for EPCC across your homes, make sure your retrofits are being planned as a whole house approach, which should mean there's no regrets. You're not having to go back and undo or redo previous works to bring homes from an EPCC up to a net zero standard further down the line. A good example of this is when you're upgrading your windows before tackling external wall insulation, because implementing EWI might mean moving your window positions to align with the insulation level. So the two measures are really better planned and delivered together if possible to avoid any wasted effort and cost. Space heat and demand targets, which featured in SHDF Wave 2.1, can be useful to help reduce heat demand, making homes more energy efficient, cheaper to run, and potentially heat pump ready. But a blanket space heat and demand target across your entire stock for your strategy is unlikely to be suitable, as some homes will be more constrained due to a whole host of factors like being listed buildings or in conservation areas, having floor areas unsuitable for certain types of measures, or having a really complex construction type. On the other hand, some homes may be relatively easier to decarbonise and lend themselves to improved air tightness, higher levels of insulation, and things like ventilation with heat recovery to help to reduce space heating demand. So look for that balance across your stock, different levels of space heating demand. And it's worth exploring different retrofit approaches like Enefit, LETI, and AECB Carbon Light. Those different standards and approaches have different, starting that way again. Those different standards and approaches may be applicable to different building archetypes and levels of constraint for retrofit. In terms of standards, if you're delivering government-funded retrofit projects, then they need to be delivered to PAS 2035. Sometimes housing providers see this as an unnecessary cost on top of their retrofit projects, but it's really in place for a reason. It's there to de-risk the projects and to drive quality improvements and the best results for residents. The last point on targets is just to not lose oversight of the overarching objectives of your retrofit programs. These are to create warm homes that are healthier and homes and neighbourhoods that residents are really proud to live in. Talking of residents, it's really important that you put them at the heart of your retrofit program and your retrofit strategy. So develop a resident engagement approach that gets them bought into your projects and ideally becomes resident champions that they can then talk to other residents about the benefits of their upgraded homes and get them on board with the retrofit program. It's important that residents during retrofit projects have a single point of contact. This is a trusted person that they can go to with any concerns about their projects, about their homes, and they should also have access to information and advice on the progress of the projects throughout the project lifecycle. You should use a variety of methods to communicate to your residents. Some residents may want to absorb information in their own time and in their own space through letters or online, through social media. Others may appreciate more in-person contact or speaking over the phone. So make sure you're tailoring your communication to your different audiences. And that starts by knowing your audience really well. You may need to translate different communications into different languages or use lots of visual aids to communicate the benefits clearly of the new systems to your residents. And your resident engagement approach should be communicated with your supply chain as well to make sure that they're on board and aligned to deliver it. I've got a case study here of Dyson Energy Services, part of the Sureserve group, who worked with Hyde Housing to deliver a 22-home retrofit pilot project. This was a multi-measure scheme, so loft insulation, solar PV, and air source heat pumps. So some levels of disruption for the residents there. We took time to understand the residents and how they best wanted to be communicated to. That involved multiple methods of communication. During the community engagement events, we also had Daikin bringing along their heat pump trailer, where residents could have a good look and feel of the technology and ask the experts on how it worked. So here's some advice for developing your strategic retrofit program. Look to integrate retrofit with asset management plans, where you can combine grant funding with maintenance budgets or budgets for end-of-life replacements. And you can also tie in with things like fire safety and building safety. You should also look for opportunities to embed climate adaptation in your retrofit projects for homes which are likely to be at risk of overheating and flooding. Again, retrofit can be the trigger for these other adaptation methods. Other key drivers for retrofit might include fuel poverty, damp and mold, but there might be wider drivers like antisocial behaviour that can also link in to your retrofit programming. You may look to develop strategic partnerships with local authorities and other housing providers to develop and deliver area-based retrofit plans and take advantage of joint procurement and economies of scale. And lastly, look to build strong long-term relationships with the supply chain. An example of this is our 16-year contract through K&T Heating, part of Sureserve, and Havering Council. So this contract is focused on the energy transition, looking for opportunities to decarbonise buildings with the end goal of net zero in sight. This slide is to really highlight the importance of capturing feedback and lessons learned throughout your retrofit projects, which will then feed into your programme. So make sure you're capturing feedback from the supply chain. Make sure you're putting monitors in homes to capture data both pre and post retrofit. And you're taking the pulse of residents through regular resident engagement and taking feedback and satisfaction surveys from them. So we'll end on some support and funding for your retrofit journey. The current landscape in terms of grant funding looks like this, with over 10 billion being available, schemes being delivered out to 2028. So these funds cover both the social housing sector and private sector homes, and in some instances cover both. We also know that more funding is expected to be announced soon. The Warm Homes Plan, details of which are likely to come in the spring budget rather than the autumn budget. But we do know that Labour has committed a high-level figure of 13.2 billion over 5 years, over and above what you're seeing on screen in terms of those current grant funding programmes. However, in our earlier slide, we saw that the cost to retrofit is likely to be over 100 billion. So private funding should also be sought to help plug the gaps between grant funding. This will also help housing providers continue to retrofit at scale, not having to wait for grant funding rounds. Private funding could be in the form of sustainability-linked loans, climate bonds, or other innovative funding sources like retrofit credits, or from your own renewable energy projects. An example of this, our company Everwarm had worked with Pobl, housing provider in Wales, to develop a solar share and battery scheme across hundreds of their homes. This is providing Pobl with an annual income of around £100,000 per year, whilst also providing residents with significant bill savings. The last slide then is about useful resources which are out there, just to let you know that you're not facing this alone. So do take advantage of some of the free support which is there via things like Rise. They're there to help you develop your retrofit funding programs. There's training through the Retrofit Academy, often funded training opportunities available. And then there's various useful guides and bits of research on different retrofit approaches and networks for you to explore. And finally, do get in touch with us if you've got any questions about this. We're also here to help housing providers on their retrofit journey. And if you've got any feedback on this webinar or any suggestions for future webinars, be it on particular technologies like air source heat pumps or solar PV or retrofit approaches, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.